The room trembled under the weight of its own silence. Cameras whirred, lights flared, and the air thickened with disbelief. Pam Bondi shot up from her chair, her face carved in fury. Papers clutched in one hand as if they were shields against the truth itself. 1,000 flashes captured the instant. The fury, the chaos, the fracture of composure. Across America, screens lit up in sync. Bondi storms out after Crockett's shock document. What began as another polished hearing, another spectacle of control, had just shattered into something far more volatile. Whispers rose from the gallery like static. Was this real? Had someone actually crossed a line even Bondi couldn't defend? Outside, pundits scrambled to their cameras. MAGA loyalists erupting in defiant applause, spinning the moment before understanding it. But inside the chamber, time froze. Crockett remained seated, still as stone, eyes steady. The faintest glint of something unspoken, not triumph, not anger, but certainty. For years, Bondi had commanded rooms like this, loud, unflinching, untouchable. Yet now, the authority she wielded seemed to slip through her fingers, replaced by the sound of her own heels striking the marble floor as she left. Each step echoed louder than her words ever had. Somewhere, a camera caught the reflection of a single envelope lying open on the table. No one dared to touch it. Reporters craned their necks, desperate to catch a glimpse of what had been revealed or what had been threatened. And in that charged silence, America collectively leaned forward. Every headline, every post, every tweet boiled down to one question. What was in that document? And why did it make her run? It was supposed to be routine, predictable, just another day in the theater of politics. But what began with one calm woman and one sealed file would soon unravel into a political storm that no one, not even Bondi herself, saw coming. It began with a single envelope and ended with a storm that would rewrite the rules of power. Hours before the chaos, the building hummed with quiet arrogance. It was supposed to be another formality, a showcase of control, a reminder of who still held the microphone in Washington. Staffers traded glances in hallways, reporters whispered about something big, and even seasoned aides felt the shift in the air. But no one could name it yet. The agenda read like clockwork: questions, answers, grandstanding. Everyone knew their role. Trump allies would hammer the same talking points. Bondi would lead the charge, confident, rehearsed, untouchable. And Jasmine Crockett. She was expected to sit, smile, and endure the noise. But Crockett had walked into that hearing carrying more than composure. In her briefcase was a file that had been whispered about for weeks, a document few had seen, one that spoke of contradictions buried under layers of political theater. To most, it was rumor. To her, it was evidence. Bondi, radiant in her practiced authority, scanned the room with the ease of someone accustomed to dominance. Every word she spoke felt calculated, her tone balanced between accusation and performance. Cameras loved her. Networks framed her as the steady hand of Trump's political legacy. Yet beneath that gloss was a hunger and need to reassert control over a narrative that had started slipping from her grasp. For Bondi and her allies, this hearing was never about oversight. It was a message. The old guard was still watching, still powerful, still ready to humiliate dissenters who dared to challenge their reign. But Crockett's silence was not submission. It was precision. As Bondi delivered her opening remarks, Crockett scribbled something in her notes, her pen steady. She wasn't reacting. She was calculating. Each interruption, each smirk from the panel, only added to the rhythm she was building in her head. The crowd could feel it too, a strange tension that grew heavier with every passing question. Something unseen was counting down. A staffer glanced nervously toward Crockett's table. The file sat neatly by her elbow, untouched but deliberate. Even its presence felt like a dare. Somewhere in the press gallery, a reporter murmured, "She's too calm." No one realized that calm was the first tremor before the quake. The hearing continued, voices overlapping, tempers flaring. Bondi's confidence filled the space like smoke, thick, performative, consuming. But the longer it went on, the more the contrast sharpened. Bondi was loud. Crockett was deliberate. Bondi chased control. Crockett waited for the moment it would collapse on its own. And when Bondi leaned back with that trademark smirk, convinced she had once again stolen the spotlight, Crockett finally lifted her eyes from the file. Just one look, quiet, steady, unflinching, and something in the room shifted. They didn't know it then, but history had already started moving. No one in that chamber realized that the countdown had already begun. Pam Bondi had mastered the art of command long before she ever stepped into the national spotlight. She was the kind of figure who didn't just enter a room, she occupied it. Her voice carried that courtroom crispness, the sharp rhythm of someone used to getting the last word. From her early days as a Florida prosecutor, she learned that dominance was performance and performance was power. In front of cameras, she was unshakable. She could take a hostile question and slice it into applause lines. When the bright lights hit her, she smiled, not out of warmth, but out of certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the audience will always side with confidence over complexity. That skill made her a star in the Trump era. She became a loyalist, a soldier for the cause, an emblem of that political theater where outrage replaced argument. When Trump needed a polished defender, Bondi was there, suited, smiling, and ready to deliver lines that made headlines by morning. No nonsense, law and order, protecting the people. Each phrase honed for effect, each pause timed to ignite applause. Her rise was not about truth, it was about control. In every hearing, every interview, she positioned herself as the arbiter of morality, the voice of discipline against chaos. She didn't just debate opponents, she dismissed them. When she interrupted, it wasn't rudeness, it was strategy. To dominate the moment, you had to own the narrative. But what happens when the script no longer fits the world? As the years passed, the crowds that once cheered began to fracture. New voices, younger, sharper, unafraid, started questioning her brand of righteousness. They didn't bow to intimidation. They didn't fear her fury. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. Behind the scenes, staffers whispered about her temper. The flash of irritation when a camera angle wasn't flattering, the cold silence after a segment didn't trend the way she wanted. Every public victory hid a private anxiety, the creeping realization that dominance doesn't last forever. Bondi watched as America shifted. The voices once dismissed, women, immigrants, progressives, the marginalized were now commanding their own spaces, telling their own stories. For someone who'd built her identity on control, that evolution felt like erosion. Still, she doubled down. The more the world changed, the louder she became. Theatrics replaced substance. Her monologues grew longer, her interruptions sharper. She wasn't adapting. She was defending the idea of herself, the image she had crafted, polished, and sold to the world. And it worked for a while. The MAGA base adored her. They saw her as a warrior, unafraid to say what others won't. Her segments went viral in echo chambers that praised aggression as authenticity. But her critics saw through it, the performance, the deflection, the desperate grasp for relevance disguised as conviction. That tension followed her to every hearing, especially this one. When she walked into that congressional chamber, every gesture was deliberate, the hair perfectly fixed, the folder color-coded, the smile, the practiced half-grin that said, "I'm in control here." She carried herself like someone who still believed she could command fear, even as respect slipped quietly away. To her allies, she was their voice of strength. To her opponents, she was the embodiment of everything they were fighting against. Power without accountability, confidence without humility. Yet underneath the armor, something fragile lingered. She could sense the shift, the audience not as easily swayed, the tone not as deferential. Even her usual tricks, the smirk, the raised eyebrow, the cutting remark, landed differently now. What once commanded silence now drew murmurs. Still, Bondi pressed forward. Because for her, retreat was unthinkable. Power had always been her language and silence, her enemy. But arrogance is a dangerous shield. It blinds even the sharpest to their own cracks. And as Bondi took her seat that morning, ready to dominate another hearing, she didn't see the shift happening around her, didn't notice the growing tension. The quiet defiance on Jasmine Crockett's face, The document waiting like a match beside dry kindling, because when you've spent your life mistaking control for strength, you never see the moment the ground beneath you starts to give way. Pam Bondi believed she was untouchable, but arrogance always plants the seeds of its own downfall. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from power, she came from purpose. Her story began in rooms far from the marble halls of Congress, in neighborhoods where justice wasn't an abstract idea but a fight you waged daily, long before the microphones, long before the hearings. There was a young woman standing in front of a judge, defending someone the system had already decided to forget. That's where her edge was forged, not in comfort, but in confrontation. She learned early that justice doesn't come freely. It's something you push for, argue for. As a defense attorney, she walked into courtrooms that weren't built for her, where her skin color, her age, and her gender were all considered liabilities. Yet every time she stood up to speak, the room changed. Her voice didn't shout to be heard. It cut through, steady and precise. In a world where arrogance shouted, Crockett learned the quiet language of conviction. There were days she lost cases where truth wasn't enough against power. But those losses didn't break her. They built her. Each injustice became another lesson in strategy, in restraint, in the patience it takes to dismantle a system piece by piece. Her rise wasn't scripted. It wasn't sponsored or staged. It came from relentless work, late nights in law libraries, endless community meetings, standing beside people who couldn't afford a lawyer but still deserved a voice. That's what made her different. While Bondi learned to perform authority, Crockett learned to embody it. Bondi practiced her smirk in green rooms. Crockett practiced resilience in courtrooms. Bondi commanded attention. Crockett earned it. By the time she entered Congress, Crockett was no stranger to confrontation. But unlike those who saw politics as theater, she saw it as an extension of the fight she'd been in her whole life for fairness, for representation, for truth that doesn't depend on who's in charge. Her colleagues quickly learned she was not a background character. Her questions were sharp, her tone unflinching. When she challenged witnesses, it wasn't to score clips. It was to hold power to account. That authenticity made her dangerous to people who thrived on optics. Bondi was one of them. When Bondi walked into hearings with polished fury and talking points, Crockett countered with something that couldn't be rehearsed: moral clarity. She didn't posture or provoke. She exposed. Her calm made others fidget. Her silence carried more threat than a raised voice ever could. Because Crockett understood something Bondi never would. True strength doesn't need to shout. Her journey had already tested her harsher than any political clash could. She had faced threats, online harassment, and the kind of coded disrespect that hides behind civility. But every attempt to diminish her only deepened her resolve. She carried herself with the poise of someone who had already survived worse storms, storms the cameras never saw. And when she finally arrived in Congress, she brought all of that history with her, the weight of every dismissed voice, every overlooked story, every woman who'd been told to stay in her lane. She didn't come to play defense. She came to draw lines. What made Crockett's presence electric wasn't anger, it was precision. She had a way of turning moments into mirrors, forcing opponents to confront what they were avoiding. When others used hearings to grandstand, she used them to reveal. Every question, every word was calculated. Not to embarrass, but to uncover. To people watching at home, she represented something deeper than politics. She was proof that composure could coexist with power, that empathy could be strength. Her supporters didn't just cheer her arguments. They saw themselves in her defiance. Behind the camera lights, though, Crockett knew what was coming. The moment she refused to play the submissive role, she became a target. Every confident pause would be labeled disrespect. Every challenge would be called aggressive. It was the same double standard she had faced her entire life, now televised. And yet, she stood taller, because for her, it was never about pleasing the room. It was about facing it. In her private reflections, she often thought of her clients, the ones who sat trembling beside her, waiting for a system that rarely offered fairness. She thought of how their lives had been shaped by decisions made in rooms like the one she now occupied. That perspective grounded her. It reminded her that every hearing, every confrontation, wasn't about political victory, it was about visibility for those who'd been silenced. So when the day came, when she sat across from Pam Bondi, folders stacked, cameras rolling, Crockett didn't see a political rival. She saw a symbol of everything she'd spent her life challenging: performance over principle, privilege over purpose. She didn't need to match Bondi's fire. She was the fire, controlled, deliberate, and inevitable. And as she placed that sealed envelope on the table, the one that would soon detonate the illusion of control in that chamber, her hands didn't shake. She had faced worse storms before, but never one this televised. The morning began with the illusion of civility. Papers shuffled, microphones adjusted, the familiar rhythm of congressional procedure filling the air. Each speaker delivered their rehearsed remarks, voices echoing in practiced monotone. Cameras rolled, pundits prepared their sound bites, and everyone knew the script, or thought they did. Pam Bondi sat poised, her posture immaculate, her smile calculated. She had done this dance countless times before: dominate the frame, interrupt with confidence, and reduce her opponents to defensive stammers. Today, she expected the same. Jasmine Crockett was supposed to be just another target. But something about Crockett's calm unsettled her. As questions began, the first sparks flew. A congressman sneered about decorum. Another chuckled under his breath as Crockett adjusted her papers. When she opened her mouth to clarify a point, she was immediately cut off. The interruptions were sharp, deliberate little acts of dismissal designed to chip away at composure. Crockett didn't flinch. She wrote something down, underlining a word. Bondi smirked, leaning back in her chair, whispering something to a colleague that drew a snicker. The cameras caught it. 1,000 viewers online clipped it. And somewhere, the countdown to confrontation began. Every attempt to bait Crockett failed. She refused to play the role they wanted: the angry woman, the loud one, the outburst. Instead, she remained unnervingly still. The more chaos they threw her way, the quieter she became. Her pen moved with deliberate rhythm: circle, note, underline. The silence grew heavy. Bondi mistook it for weakness. "Cat, got your tongue?" She quipped into her mic, pretending to laugh. A few on her side chuckled, feeding off the moment. The laughter echoed like arrogance always does, loud and fleeting. But others in the room began to shift uncomfortably. They'd seen that look before, the kind that meant someone wasn't backing down, just preparing. Crockett finally looked up. Her eyes swept across the table, calm and focused. She didn't respond to the jabs. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked through them, past them, as if she already knew where this was going. A producer in the press box muttered, "Something's about to happen." Bondi straightened her papers, suddenly feeling the attention tilt toward Crockett. It wasn't supposed to go this way. She was supposed to be in control, but control was slipping invisibly, irrevocably. The moderator gave Crockett the floor. She didn't speak right away. She took a sip of water. The delay stretched seconds into suspense. You could hear the faint hum of cameras, the rustle of someone's sleeve, the sound of Bondi exhaling through her nose. Every second of silence was a countdown. When Crockett finally leaned toward the mic, her voice was measured, not defensive, not emotional, but precise. "I've been listening," she said softly, "and I've been taking notes." Bondi rolled her eyes, ready with a comeback, but the words caught in her throat. Crockett continued, unbothered. "Because when people interrupt you long enough, they tell you exactly what they're afraid you'll say." The room froze. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in. On social media, clips began surfacing. Timestamps marked, "Crockett's about to speak." The chat rooms, the live stream comments, the political feeds all echoed the same thing: 3 minutes until she speaks. Bondi adjusted her mic. The confidence in her eyes wavered. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Crockett saw it. Everyone did. The tone had shifted from mockery to momentum. Crockett placed her pen down, straightened her stack of papers, and gave the faintest of smiles. It wasn't smug. It was surgical. "Madam Chair," she said, "I'll be brief." In that moment, that poised breath before the storm, the entire room seemed to hold itself still. Even the loudest voices went quiet, waiting. Because suddenly everyone understood. This wasn't patience. It was preparation. Bondi glanced toward the cameras, realizing too late that the narrative was slipping from her grasp. Crockett turned a single page, revealing an envelope. A hush fell, and when her turn came, the storm broke wide open. The envelope rests in Jasmine Crockett's hands, small, unassuming, but charged with silent power. Every eye in the chamber locks onto it. For a heartbeat, no one breathes. Cameras zoom in. Somewhere in the press box, a producer whispers, "She's really going to do it." Crockett doesn't rush. She looks around the room to the lawmakers who've smirked, to the pundits watching through their screens, to Pam Bondi, who sits perfectly still but whose jaw tightens by the second. Finally, Crockett speaks. "Since transparency seems to be optional for some," she says, her voice calm and unwavering, "let's make it mandatory for all." The words hang in the air like an indictment. She slides the document from the envelope, crisp pages stamped, signed official. The microphones catch the faint rustle as she lays them on the desk. "This," she continues, tapping the top page, "is not opinion. It's record." Bondi straightens in her chair, readying her trademark smirk, but the smirk falters as Crockett begins to read. Her tone isn't theatrical. It's surgical. On March 12th, this committee received testimony claiming no outside coordination took place. She flips the page. Yet here internal correspondence showing coordination to the letter, times, dates, sign-offs. The sound in the room shifts. It's no longer polite attention, it's stunned stillness. Bondi interjects. "Those documents," Crockett cuts her off without raising her voice, "are public record now." A ripple moves through the crowd. Cameras flash. One reporter mouths, "Oh my God." Bondi's expression hardens, but her composure is fraying. She whispers to an aide, who leans in and whispers back. The whisper itself becomes a story. Crockett turns another page. There's more. "A payment authorization bearing your own signature, Ms. Bondi." Just days before your public statement claiming impartiality, a sharp gasp cuts through the silence. Even the panel moderator shifts uneasily. Bondi tries to interject again, louder this time, that's taken out of context. But Crockett doesn't flinch. "I agree," she replies evenly. "Context matters. That's why I brought all of it." She slides the remaining pages forward. Reporters scramble to zoom their lenses. The contrast couldn't be starker. Bondi's bluster versus Crockett's composure. The more Bondi fidgets, the calmer Crockett becomes. Every move deliberate, every pause intentional. "See, this isn't about personalities," Crockett says. "It's about patterns. And the pattern is clear. Deny, deflect, distract." The line lands like a gavel strike. Bondi exhales sharply, flipping through her notes. "This is a stunt," she mutters. "Pure theater." Crockett looks up. Steady. "Theater is pretending. This is proof." A murmur swells through the audience, low at first, then rising. Journalists begin live tweeting. Networks that had tuned out are suddenly broadcasting back in. Hashtags start forming. Hashtag Crockett strikes. Hashtag Bondi exposed. Hashtag truth in session. Crockett lowers her voice. For years, people have been told that accountability is optional for the powerful, that some voices are too loud to challenge. But here's the truth. Silence isn't civility. It's surrender. The words settled deep, beyond politics, into something human. She looks straight ahead, eyes locked on Bondi. "This isn't about me. It's about every American tired of being told to sit down when truth stands up." As the chamber erupts, not in chaos, but in something more dangerous to the old order. Applause. It begins softly, from the public gallery, then spreads. Even a few members on the dais can't resist nodding. The moderator's gavel taps for order, but the sound can't compete with the surge of approval. Bondi's face reddens. "This is a disgrace." She shouts over the noise. "You're grandstanding for cameras." Crockett turns slightly, her voice almost a whisper now, but the room leans in to hear. "If you're afraid of cameras, perhaps you shouldn't perform for them." The line slices through the noise. A collective gasp follows. Then silence. Bondi's fury builds behind her eyes, the kind that doesn't stay hidden. She stands abruptly, knocking a pen to the floor. The clatter echoes louder than the gavel. Enough, she spits, gathering her folder. I won't be part of this circus. Crockett doesn't move. She just says, softly, that's your choice. But the record will remain. Bondi freezes just for a second. Then she storms out, heels striking the marble with sharp rhythmic anger. Cameras follow her. Flashbulbs explode like lightning. The scene descends into organized chaos. Reporters swarm the exits. Aides rush to control narratives, and the audience buzzes with disbelief. Someone in the crowd whispers, "Did that really just happen?" On social media, the clip is already spreading. Networks splice the footage. Bondi storming out, Crockett standing firm, the envelope in her hand like a symbol of calm defiance. The moderator calls for order, but the energy can't be contained. The moment has already escaped the room. It's out there now. Pulsing through feeds, looping on screens, turning into legend. Crockett gathers her papers quietly. No gloating, no smirk, just quiet resolve. As she turns off her microphone, she looks up once more. Her expression says, "What words can't? This isn't over." The camera zooms in on the envelope still resting on the table, the catalyst of it all. And that was only the beginning. It starts like a spark, one clip, one caption, one frame frozen in disbelief. Then it catches fire. Within hours, the footage of Pam Bondi storming out and Jasmine Crockett standing tall floods every timeline in America. Crockett strikes back, hashtag Bondi storms out, hashtag truth files. The hashtags surge to the top of trending lists before dawn. Edits appear within minutes, dramatic slow-motion cuts, reaction videos, remixes with cinematic soundtracks. TikToks pair Crockett's final line with everything from gospel choirs to hip-hop beats. On X, one user writes, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." Another posts, "That's what Grace Under Fire looks like." Thousands echo it. Millions view it. By nightfall, every major outlet has replayed the exchange. Cable networks run side-by-side panels, half the screen showing Bondi's exit, the other showing Crockett's calm. Headlines multiply. Congresswoman Crockett shuts down chaos with calm. Bondi walks out as truth unfolds. Late-night hosts dive in. One jokes, "You can't storm out of accountability." Other adds, "It's always the envelope you didn't open that ends your career." The crowd laughs, but beneath it runs something more admiration. Commentators call it the day the script flipped. Political podcasts dissect it like it's a championship match. How Crockett controlled the tempo. How Bondi lost composure. How one envelope redefined what a mic drop moment looks like in modern politics. Even conservative media, usually defiant, struggles to spin it. One pundit sighs live on air, "Look, I don't like her politics, but that was a masterclass in composure." Meanwhile, Crockett's team can barely keep up. Notifications flood in, thousands of messages, emails, DMs from strangers thanking her for speaking what so many feel but can't say. A mother from Detroit writes, "My daughter watched your clip and said, 'That's what a leader looks like.'" A retired teacher from Arizona adds, "You reminded us that facts still matter." The comment sections fill with digital applause. People repost the moment like a victory lap for truth itself. And then come the memes. Bondi frozen, Medexit. Captioned with phrases like, "When the receipts drop," or "Accountability." 1. Arrogance, 0. Someone loops the clip into a 10-hour Bondi storms out video. It racks up hundreds of thousands of views overnight. But the reaction isn't just mockery, it's reflection. The clip becomes a conversation starter. College students discuss it in government classes. Activists use it in speeches about integrity. It becomes shorthand for standing your ground. Crockett, meanwhile, stays quiet. No press tour, no victory lap. Her silence speaks louder than any interview could. While networks debate her every expression, she posts only one line. "Truth doesn't shout. It stands." That post alone garners millions of likes. Screenshots of it spread faster than any soundbite. It becomes a mantra. In political circles, the ripple effect deepens. Staffers whisper that Bondi's team is in damage control. Allies who once followed her lead are suddenly distancing themselves. Donors pause. Committees postpone appearances. For once, the noise doesn't protect her. It isolates her. And as the week unfolds, Crockett's influence expands. Invitations pour in, panels on transparency, discussions on integrity, podcasts about the power of calm confrontation. She accepts few. The mystique only grows. A headline in The Atlantic captures it best: when silence became the loudest statement in Washington. By the weekend, the narrative is no longer about a walkout. It's about what that walkout revealed. Audiences start connecting dots: how arrogance crumbles under truth, how control built on bluster dissolves when confronted by quiet conviction. Bondi's defenders try to rekindle outrage, but every attempt feels smaller. The story has already moved on, not away from her, but beyond her. Because the true legacy of that moment isn't the exit. It's the echo. It's the way millions who'd given up on watching congressional hearings suddenly feel something again: belief. It's the way that single phrase, "This isn't about me." It's about every American tired of being told to sit down when truth stands up, starts showing up on protest signs, in bios and murals. The viral moment becomes a movement moment. And as Sunday night descends, a viral post sums it up perfectly. Pam Bondi walked out of Congress, but Jasmine Crockett walked straight into history. But as the camera fades to black, the narration leaves us with one more question. One the audience can't shake off. If one truth spoken in one room could cause this much upheaval, what happens when millions start speaking theirs? Because the true legacy of that moment reached far beyond the viral reels. Days pass, but the conversation refuses to fade. Reporters keep calling, cameras keep circling, and pundits keep replaying the same clip, dissecting it frame by frame as if one more slow-motion replay might reveal a new angle. But when Jasmine Crockett finally speaks again, it isn't in front of the flashing lights or roaring microphones. It's a quiet press room. No theatrics. No applause. Just her voice, steady and deliberate. She begins not with triumph, but with truth. "I didn't come to Washington to trade insults," she says. "I came to trade excuses for accountability." There's no gloating, no political spin. She doesn't name Bondi. She doesn't need to. The nation already knows. Crockett pauses, letting the silence breathe, the same silence that once made the chamber tremble. Then she delivers the line that will echo far beyond the news cycle. "Dignity," she says, "will always outlast arrogance." For a moment, even the reporters lower their pens. It's not just a quote. It's a rebuke to a culture addicted to shouting matches and power plays. It's a reminder that leadership isn't loud, it's lasting. As her words spread, the tone of the conversation shifts. Commentators start replaying the clip not as a scandal, but as a lesson. Editorials appear in the Washington Post, Rolling Stone, and The Guardian, each echoing a version of the same theme. In an era of spectacle, Crockett chose substance. The public responds in kind. Hashtags evolve from mockery into movement. Hashtag Crockett Strikes Back becomes hashtag Stand with Dignity. Students quote her in graduation speeches. Teachers use her words to spark discussions about courage and truth in a divided democracy. Across social media, Americans tired, disillusioned, hopeful, begin to share their own stories of standing their ground. A nurse posts, "When they tried to silence me, I remembered, dignity outlasts arrogance," a veteran adds. It's not about being loud. It's about being right. It's as if Crockett's composure cracked something open. A collective exhale from those who'd long felt drowned out by the noise. Cable shows, still hungry for ratings, invite her back, but she declines. Instead, she releases one final message. This was never about humiliation. It was about restoration of trust, of truth, of what public service should look like. The phrase ricochets across networks, campaign offices, and living rooms. Viewers sensed something different in her tone, not victory, but vision. Because beneath the drama, beneath the viral storm, the heart of the story has always been bigger. A clash between those who wield power as spectacle and those who treat truth as service. Bondi's storm out becomes a metaphor for an old guard, one that mistakes volume for strength, dominance for leadership. Crockett's calm becomes its counterpoint, an emblem of a quieter, steadier kind of power that doesn't crumble under pressure. And for once, the takeaway isn't outrage, it's relief. Relief that someone, somewhere, reminded America that the fight for integrity isn't lost, just waiting to be reclaimed. In classrooms, civic panels, and social feeds, people begin quoting her line not as a soundbite but as a principle. Dignity will always outlast arrogance. It's written on posters, painted on murals, whispered in moments of defiance, because deep down, people recognize what they saw, not just a takedown but a turning point. A reminder that truth doesn't need permission to speak, only courage to stand. As the news cycle moves on, and new scandals replace the old, that one moment the envelope, the silence, the walkout remains etched in memory. It becomes folklore in modern American politics, the story of how one woman used composure as a weapon and truth as a shield. And when future hearings descend into chaos, someone inevitably brings it up. Remember when Crockett stood her ground? They'll say, that's how it's done. Because in the end, she didn't just win a debate or survive a storm. She redefined what power sounds like, clear, unshakable. And as the screen fades to black, one truth lingers, soft but seismic. Real strength doesn't shout. It stands. Pam Bondi stormed out, but Jasmine Crockett's words stayed, echoing far beyond that chamber. What began as confrontation ended as a statement of truth that refused to fade. This moment wasn't about spectacle or winning a headline. It was about showing that integrity doesn't flinch, even when arrogance tries to shout it down. It was about proving that calm, conviction, and courage can shake the kind of power built on noise. Crockett's voice became more than a response. It became a reminder. A reminder that democracy isn't sustained by theatrics. It's sustained by those who dare to tell the truth when it's least convenient. Her words lingered not because they were loud, but because they were real. And that's the message that matters now. If you believe that voices like hers deserve to be amplified, if you believe truth still deserves the spotlight, this is your moment to stand with it. Subscribe to Capital Clash, where truth breaks through the noise. Join a community that celebrates accountability, courage, and stories that prove justice always has the last word. Because what you just witnessed wasn't just a political moment. It was a moral one. A reminder that character doesn't need cameras, and dignity doesn't need to shout. Pam Bondi walked out. Jasmine Crockett stood tall. One left the room, the other left a legacy. Because sometimes, the loudest exit is still silence in the face of truth.